Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to my first look at the Rheinmetall Skorpion G, the upcoming Tier 8 premium German tank destroyer. And, well, TLDR, it doesn't suck! This is one of those wargaming premiums that actually has come out in a workable state. It's actually somewhat fun to play. And you never know with the World of Tanks premiums. There's a whole thing in Game of Thrones with the Targaryen kings, and I can't remember the exact saying, but it's like, you know, every time a new Targaryen is born, you know, the gods flip a coin and the world holds its breath, you know, to see if they're going to be sane and normal and sensible, or completely, you know, crazy and feeding people to dragons and sparking civil wars and just generally a bit nuts. Yeah, it's exactly the same with World of Tanks premiums. You never know if they're going to be, you know, decent, or dare I say even fun to play, or just downright awful like the Panzer 3K. And it's, I mean, just even over the last year, we've had plenty of examples like the AC1 and the AC4. It's night and day. The AC4 was actually a reasonably decent premium medium tank, whereas the AC1 was awful. Panzer 3K was awful. The FV, the Tier 8 British medium premium, when that went from being the regular Tier 10 to being a Tier 8, that was pretty bad when it came out. The gun handling was shockingly bad. This, I am happy to report, is not one of those. This is actually pretty damn decent. Now, that's not to say everybody's going to enjoy it. It is basically one of the Waffenträger tank destroyers, and it's on what looks like a Panther chassis, although if you're expecting it to have some armour on the hull, you're going to be disappointed, but I'll get to that in a second. It is a 128mm gunned Tier 8 tank destroyer, so you've got the same gun as the regular Tier 8 tank destroyers. You've got a fully rotatable turret, and you've got a pretty decent turn of speed. So what's the fly in the ointment? Well, it's really to do with just the size of the thing. I mean, first off, and we'll actually switch to the armour view. First off, it is squashy. I mean, really squashy. The best armour you've got, as you can see, is this 30mm on the hull. And then you've got 14mm on the gun shield, and then the sides are like 16, the top deck is 10, the rear is 20. Like the best you get is if somebody like shoots through the tracks, and then you've got a whole 40mm effective. So yeah, any illusions you might have had about this having a Panther hull and therefore maybe some hull armor, no. This thing will eat all of the HE shells and all of the HE damage and just every other shell that gets lobbed at it, basically. So like the Borsig, you cannot afford to sit in the open and take a lot of shots, but unlike the Borsig, you've got a pretty poor camo value in comparison. And tanks.gg doesn't actually give a listing for the camo ratings, but the client itself now does. And I actually did, with the same setup for all of the regular Tier 8 tank destroyers and this thing, it's actually got a worse camo value than the Ferdinand and the Jagdpanther 2. Not by a big margin, only by, it was like 1% or something, but it is around half as stealthy as the Rheinmetall Borsig, and of course it's just as squashy as the Borsig, so you have to be quite careful. But what it does have over the Borsig is a pretty good turn of speed. Now, I'll do a very quick rundown of the stats. I mean, everything's just either actually quite good or at least decent, apart from the camo value and the armor. Your DPM, 2400, and that's without gun rammer selected there. That's a respectable base DPM. It's less than the Jagdpanther and the other regular Tier 8 tank destroyers, but 2400 is not. It doesn't feel like it's crippled. I mean, you've got the 128mm guns, so you've got good damage. The rate of fire is pretty decent. The aim time, and bear in mind, tanks.gg gives all of these stats with the equivalent of 100% crew. So the base dispersion is 0.3, for example, but with 100% crew, of course, that's going to be 0.29. So, with the 100% crew, just over 2 seconds. Aim time, the dispersion value is good, although it's not so good when you're on the move. So When you're stationary, it's got very good accuracy, but you don't really ever want to fire on the move if you can help it. And the other Skorpion, the M56 down at tier 7 on the US line, that's exactly the same. In fact, a lot of tank destroyers are the same. They don't fire well on the move. On turret traverse, however, that's a much better figure. Speed is good, 60 kmh, and you're going to accelerate to that reasonably quickly with 17 horsepower per ton. What's the something power ratio? Power to weight ratio. There we go. Wow, my brain just froze up completely there. So yeah, it moves around pretty well. The hull traverse 30 is not blistering, but it's still pretty good. The terrain resistances, I think, are a bit on the low side actually. I don't think it's got massively good terrain resistances, but it moves around well enough. Gun elevation 14, that I think is fairly decent, and you can get the gun up reasonably high. 7 degrees, well, 7 degrees is, and I'll just show you the gun constraint map here, 7 degrees is only over the sides. Over the back, you've got -3, so don't shoot behind you, basically. Ahead of you, the front angle, just over the front armor, basically, you've only got -6, so you have to angle the hull slightly to get that -7. But it doesn't really matter, because angled or not, you're going to get penned all the same, so it's like you might as well angle the hull to get the extra degree of gun depression. The turret goes all the way around, and this is a really big boon, because that's not necessarily always the case. On the American turreted tank destroyer line, for example, not all of them do go all the way around. So if you come up against one of these things, be aware that although the gun depression is terrible over the rear, it can at least get its gun round over the rear, unlike, say, the T28 prototype or the T110E4. View range 360, and that's actually not bad. You could, if you had a really good crew on it, and I played with a Brothers in Arms crew, I kind of assumed you would have a good German tank destroyer crew, and binoculars. I think if we get the binoculars, will it tell us what it can go out to? 450. So with binoculars, with a Brothers in Arms crew, well, actually that would be even better, but even just with binoculars, it's enough to get it to max spotting range. If you had instead optics, you obviously wouldn't have to then stop and wait for the binos to come up, but it drops rather significantly. And if let's say we assumed we had the Brothers in Arms crew, you could get that to 404 meters, but still you would probably be better off overall, I would say, with optics, and possibly like as a setup generally. I think I used the gun rammer, and I think also the gun laying drive, but you probably could get away without the gun laying drive and have a camo net to go along with your binoculars if you felt so inclined, to try and mitigate some of that fairly bad camo value. So what we'll do next, and I'm going to show you how the sausages are made here. There we go. I've got it all pre-lined up. We've got a comparison with the other tank destroyers. In fact, we'll just, for the lols, throw in the 8.8 as well. So DPM wise, like I said, below the regulars, but better than the Kanonenjadgpanzer, which really just, the gun and the DPM was just so disappointing on that machine. Not as good as the 8.8, but of course that thing, lackluster penetration but limited matchmaking, which this doesn't have, by the way. It's a full matchmaking machine. With this gun, it was almost inevitably going to be. But yeah, that can pump out its shells very quickly indeed. Let's see, we'll go down a bit further. Aim time, as you can see, it is not as good as the Kanonenjadgpanzer. That was one of the few saving graces of that thing, but better than all the regular branch. Accuracy, it actually is the best overall. Dispersion, the moving value is actually the worst overall. So, like I said, you have to sit still. You really have to sit still to actually fire this thing effectively. But just when you're traversing the gun. Well, the figure of 0.16, it's not bad, but you compare it to the rest when they're just traversing their guns within the casemate. I think casemate destroyers always get a better value as far as that's concerned, as opposed to ones that have a turret. But the Borsig does have a turret, and that still has a better dispersion value. So you have to wait a little bit extra compared to, say, the Borsig for the dispersion to not to stop kicking in, if you see what I mean. But the aim time, I think this is the Borsig. I think I put the 128 on it for comparative purposes. The aim time is still, overall probably going to be quicker, even with this slightly higher dispersion figure. In terms of speed, only the Kanonenjadgpanzer has a better top speed, but 60 is still good though. I mean, it's actually, it'll beat a Jagdpanther 2 in a straight line, and that thing is known for having a reasonably good speed. Terrain resistances, yeah, my suspicions were correct. The terrain resistances are generally worse. Worse even than the Jagdtiger, although one of them is equal, the medium terrain resistance. So they've kind of, they've given it a good power to weight ratio, good acceleration, good top speed, but it's slightly mitigated by those terrain resistances. Turret traverse, 18.77 degrees a second apparently, which is identical to the Waffenträger. So it's not especially fast turning. You're probably still going to have to watch out for people trying to circle strafe you, but because you've got that turret that goes all the way around, because your hull traverse is actually fairly decent, I think between the two you should be able to keep up, depending on what's trying to circle strafe you. But yeah, if you just sat stationary, it's not the most fast responding turret ever, but just the fact that you have a turret that goes all the way around is quite useful. The armor we already know is pretty damn bad. Health, like I said, it's fairly average, but if you look at this group, it's actually it's the same as the Jagdpanther 2, and it's sort of on the low end, but it's slightly better than the Borsig gets. View range 360 is fairly standard, apart from the 8.8, which kept its 390 from before they changed all of the regular tank destroyers. So it's neither especially good or bad in that regard. Does have a slightly higher fire chance on the engine, however, than some of the others. And given how squashy it is, that actually might be an issue. I didn't catch on fire at any point, but this might be one of those ones where you just run it with premium fire extinguisher, even if you don't use any other premium consumables. Because the thing with premium fire extinguishers especially is the amount of times you're going to need them. It's probably worth having them for all your higher tier tanks anyway, just so that on those occasions when you do catch on fire, yeah, it's going to cost you 20k credits, but most of the time, most battles, it won't cost you that amount of money. Whereas things like medkits and the repair kits, you're probably going to be using far more often. So that's it for the stats. I've got 2 bits of gameplay for you. We'll see this thing in action, and then I'll get to my final thoughts. So the first game is this tier 9 game on Mountain Pass, and you're going to see, I mean, I don't know if this is typical gameplay or not, because I want you to bear a couple of things in mind. First, I recorded this all on a Saturday where it was an event weekend. It was Wargaming's 18th birthday event weekend. Some of the teams were diabolically bad. I think I played for 2 or 3 hours on Saturday afternoon, and the games you're going to see are the best games that I had. A lot of matches were over in like 3 or 4 minutes. So, in the span that I played, I still managed to get through a fair few matches just because the teams were so terrible. I was probably fiddling with settings at this point, by the way. Every time I switch over, I always forget to do it. Like, I log into one of these test accounts or whatever. World of Tanks does not remember all of your settings from your, regular account. So you have to go and put on colorblind mode and change tank markers and change reticle settings and so on and so forth. So yeah, I should do it in the garage, and I always forget every single time. Anyway, so I've managed 2 hits so far, and the first hit on the Super Pershing, that was actually, I was not expecting to make that, but when you're fully aimed, however, stationary target like that on the IS, with this accuracy, 0.3 base accuracy, you expect to get a hit. Now, as I said, I had a full Brothers-in-Arms crew kitted out. I also had a full camo crew on this thing. I figured if you had any of the German Waffenträger line, you would, in fact, have a full camo crew. One peculiarity, talking of crew, that I forgot to mention, your commander is your loader. So you've got a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a radio man. It's a little bit awkward. So You can't have any loader skills on this unless you train a commander that also is a loader, but then you can't use that commander on another German tank destroyer because those loader skills won't work in the commander slot. So it's a bit peculiar in its crew setup. You can't train loaders with this machine. You can only train commander, gunner, driver, and the radio man. And I think the regular tier 8s both have a radio man. At least the Ferdinand, I'm pretty sure, has a radio man. I can't remember if the Jagdpanther 2 does, which I should know. I actually have one. But as a crew trainer, it maybe makes it a little bit less desirable. But as an actual machine to play, I think, like I've said, it's actually pretty good. So I'm very aware there's artillery, and that's the one bit of cover where I can come forward and get some shots here. And it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter at all. And this is one of the reasons why I picked out this replay. Is that one splash, I don't think that was even a direct hit. It was a close splash. Took off the vast majority of my health. I'm now down to 2/3 of my... I've lost 2/3 of my health. And a crewman. And my tracks are yellow. This thing is incredibly vulnerable to artillery. And I'm sure any drivers of the Waffenträger line generally will already be very well aware of that fact. So any kind of derp guns, artillery, even just normal tanks firing HE are a threat. Now I probably should have dropped back at this point, and instead I went forwards. Bit of a mistake because I know the AMX-30 is about to come around that corner and was not fully aimed. Unfortunately went in his tracks and he was able to just snap a shot back at me. Now I'm quite lucky to be alive. I've got 21 hit points. So the merest sniff of artillery and I am done for at this point. However, the T10 has arrived, so he hopefully can take the hits better than I can. And again, it goes in the tracks. Now, that was, I think, the on-the-move dispersion in action there. I did not stop to aim that. That was a pure snapshot. But given the circumstances, that you don't want to sit in the open. You don't want to even give them that little bit of time to make the shot. Because, 21 hit points, it's not a lot. So, we've just about broken the enemy team. I mean, I've got 2 kills myself. There are a pair of IS-6s and the enemy artillery left. And I might just sneak this kill for a 3rd kill. So, there we go. Now, that time, the shell did go more or less where I wanted it to. And that's meant I've been able to get a little bit more XP. But probably not a lot, because you don't... Just kills on their own don't count for that much. They do give you a bonus, but they don't count for that much. It's doing the damage that really gives you a lot. Now at this point I should have just turned around. I don't know why I thought I'd get to hit anything from the bridge, because quite clearly the other IS-6, I mean just the moment of the countdown timer going off should have been a giveaway. Someone's just driven across the cap circle. Obviously, and instead, I don't know, it took until the IS-6 meeting the IS-3 face-to-face that I sort of went, oh yeah, that's where he is. So the rest of my teammates have disposed of the artillery, and I'm just going to go and see if I can help the IS-3. Now they're both face-hugging each other, which means there's probably going to be a lot of bounces going on right now. In theory, the IS-3 ought to have an easier time of it, but that's only in theory. I know I can get the commander's hatches. The accuracy is good enough. So I line up the shot. There we go. 541. That's a nice high roll. And the IS-6 obviously knows I'm here at this point. I see somebody's fired. I assume it's the IS-3. But no, it was the IS-6. Oh well. Rather, the other way around. Wow, I know what I meant to say. I know what I meant to say. It was the IS-3 that fired, not the IS-6. So, yeah, the IS-6 sensing a chance to get a kill himself, then put his final shot to do damage into me. And actually, it's the T-10 turning up along the glacier that then finishes him off. So, that was the 2nd class. It was around 2.3k damage, I think. And overall, not a bad game. I mean, alongside the fact that it was terrible teams and terrible weekend teams when I was playing, don't ask how I'm top score, by the way, I don't know. Shooting at higher tier vehicles? I don't know. But bear in mind that I have relatively little experience playing machines like the Rheinmetall Skorpion. I've got the Kanonenjadgpanzer, which is squashy, but the rest of my German tank destroyers are... it's the other line. I'm on the Jagdpanther 2. That's as far as I've gotten up with those. The Waffenträger line, it's the tier 4. I don't even have the tier 5. So... I don't know, I mean, some of the British tank destroyers are pretty squashy, the Challenger, for instance, or some of the mid and low tiers, but that's not the same as machines like this. Pretty squashy isn't the same as tanks like the Borsig and this thing that are incredibly vulnerable to pretty much any caliber of HE shell. There's a difference between 70 mil of armour, which is still not, you know, much of anything on one of these machines, and then 30 mil of armour, which is just incredibly vulnerable to everything. Anyway, this is the next game, and being cautious again, it's a tier 10 artillery. I usually, by the way, in my replays have the team panels set so that you can actually see what tanks are on each side. But with 15.1 having dropped and the software basically that runs the UI having changed to, what is it, ActionScript. They've gone from Flash to ActionScript. There are now a number of bugs with the UI, and one of the ones that's been noted is that a lot of the time tank silhouettes don't turn up in replays. Another one is that you now cannot change the player, the team list. It's stuck by default on and yes, I did just bounce a shell off my Allied E5 there. It's stuck by default on the player names, so yeah, it's not ideal. I prefer to have a list for replays of the actual tanks. I think it makes it easier just to see what is what at a glance. But if you can recognise the little camos, the little symbols for what the tanks are, then you can have a reasonable guess. So there's some scary tanks around, but there we go. I actually successfully get a sneaky shot off on that Skoda. But this gun, I mean, the gun is good enough. That was one of the issues with the big issues with the Kanonenjadgpanzer, is that the gun was not good enough, and it was almost as squashy as this thing. It is almost as squashy as this thing. I don't know why I suddenly went into the past tense there. It's only got something like 60 frontal armour, so it's not quite as vulnerable to HE shells, or at least HE shells fired from normal tanks that you might meet, but it's still very, very vulnerable to artillery, and you don't really have the firepower to back it up. All you've got is a decent turn of speed. Anyway, kill that low health, I get a kill on the low health T50, which just backed out slightly too far, so that's fine, I'll take that. And, well, if I can get some more sneaky shots here, that'd be nice, but I'm not honestly sure how it's going at the moment. I mean, like I said, it's a good enough gun for seeing tier 10s, but the machine itself, like 1150 hit points is not a lot facing tier 10s. That's 2 or 3 shots at most, and if you get derped by an artillery, you could easily just get wiped out. I do spot the M103 is looking a bit cheeky, however, so yeah, he's a little bit angled. He knows I'm there, or he knows something's there, because he was starting to back up to maybe try and get a shot, but I put one in his tracks. And then, I don't know if you can see that as particularly callous or not, but I wasn't expecting the Borsig to actually pull out there, so having seen the Borsig take a hit, I then go, okay, I'm going to take a hit, or take the shot on the guy myself. Now that shot was just poorly aimed, but it didn't matter. I mean, there was a very low chance it would have actually penned the cupola, even if I'd been probably aiming at the cupola, but never mind, somebody else actually took him out, so that's fine. So it looks like we've stabilised things, and we're actually now slightly ahead on numbers, and I mean, I felt like the team was good enough to win in this one, and I was just able to do my part. I don't know how well this would do as a machine for carrying. It would heavily depend on the map and the matchmaking, but I think at least it's got the speed for it. Although, like a lot of tank destroyers, especially, it's just squashy tanks generally, it's the health pool that you're relying on. You really have no armour to rely on whatsoever. But if you've got people that aren't paying attention to you, and you can pop out and whack them in the face for 500, then that's absolutely ideal. And this is where the turret comes in, really useful. If this was a Jagdpanzer or Ferdinand, you'd have to come out, you'd have to like sort of turn your tank all the way around towards them, and that all takes extra time. So we've mopped up the rest of what was in the town. I think our top tiers did reasonably well in this one. I was not able to get that prot kill, but I might just sneak the low health bulldog. There we go, 57. Still slightly wary of artillery. There were a couple of ones where, a couple of games I had where artillery went for me, I think just because I was in the new tank. But generally speaking, I didn't find that too much. I've actually had a lot more attention when I've been playing the new German battleships in warships. They've excited a lot more interest. Even just playing the Scharnhorst, the one that I did the video for yesterday, as this is going out, but today, as of recording this, it gets confusing when you're doing overnight uploads. Yeah, I had one or two people go, "Oh, Skorpion, what's that?" But a lot of people just didn't seem to care. Now, you'll have noticed the 113 and the T-5041 and this T-49. Did I mention it was an event weekend and the teams were special? I was just glad that this team waited until the very end to be special. Now, the T-49 is just mucking around at this point. I don't think he's seriously trying to troll me. I mean, this is just like you're in a new tank. But we also have a bit of team killing going on. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the story behind what that was. But, you know, the 113 killed the T-5041 and then the T-30 immediately shot the 113. Weekend teams. Weekend teams. So, the RT turns, and I think that's... Oh, complete snapshot at me, but I do get a hit in and somebody else gets the kill. So, that was slightly hairy, but... it was fine. It was fine. I mean, that kind of snapshot is usually going to be okay. So no other medals there apart from the Ace Tanker and a pair of, well, a ribbon and one of the minor awards. And that time it was just over 3,000 damage with 3 kills, which was enough to put me at the top of the team. But like I said, I think everybody pulled their weight more or less in that one. But the IS-7 maybe not so much, but the damage counts all round were fairly reasonable, and for just under 7 minutes, 71k profit. I mean, these shells are 1,000 credits apiece, so you can't afford to spam them too much, but you've got a decent enough ammo capacity. I mean, one of the among the many complaints in the Panzer 3K was just how little ammo it carried. That's not the case in this. It's not got a huge store of ammo, but as long as you're not massively spamming it around the place, you shouldn't ever run out. But I don't know what it would be like in a 15-minute battle, for instance, a much longer, kind of more tense battle, because there just wasn't anything like that on Saturday. The 2 games that you've seen are actually 2 of the longer games I had. So overall, do I think this is worth the money? Well, it's going to be 10,900 gold. That has been confirmed to me by Wargaming EU, which probably puts it around, what, 35 to 40 euros? It's going to be in that range. As an actual premium tank destroyer, it's reasonably fun to play. And as a crew trainer, maybe it's less good, but you can get like the important members of crew, and like for some lines, maybe you'd have to pull a radio man from elsewhere, and it's just a pity you can't train the loader. But overall, do I think this is a good premium? Yes. Whether you think it's worth it is up to you, because of course not everybody's going to like the fact that this is a super squashy tank destroyer. Not everyone's going to enjoy that. But overall, you know, compared to some of the misses we've had recently with premiums, this one is a definite hit. So if you found this guide useful, this preview, whatever you want to call it, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.